All right, hello and welcome. Today is Tuesday, January 10th. We have made it through our first week, and here we are in week two of game music composition. You have completed your first round of assignments. Week one assignments were due on Sunday. And you completed your first game composition, 2D platformer, and you also worked on the looping assignment and turned all of those in, and those are now in my court. And I am working on grades and feedback for each of those. So you'll probably see the production technique roll in first, and then probably by Wednesday or Thursday, I will complete all of the feedback for your group. But we'll also start with a bit of that today. We had a total of 12 different submissions here for 2D platformer for the peer review on FSO. You have a separate assignment for peer review where you can take your game composition and format it in a particular way and submit it up to FSO so that we can take a listen to it. And peer review is great for everyone involved. For those that submitted, we can go through it live. We can talk about your submission. If you happen to be here for the live class, we can talk about, you can ask any questions and we can discuss any aspect of the composition overall. Of course, if you're just watching on the archive, then you get to see me go through it step by step. Everybody will receive feedback written out on FSO, but here you get to see me step through it and talk my way through. And for everybody else, even if you didn't submit for your composition for peer review, it gives everyone an opportunity to see how everybody else is working, see all the good stuff and the bad stuff. We'll point out individual things that, hey, this is a really good approach, a really good idea here. And then overall, if the group's doing some things that aren't working out so well, we'll kind of point out those aspects as well. So everybody gets a chance to see what other folks are working on, and you'll see things that you probably would never have ever even considered at some point, both good and bad. And so we want to take the opportunity to listen to these 12 submissions, and hopefully this will encourage you next week when you have the week 2 peer review to submit for our next game, and we'll take a listen to your composition and talk our way through. So, and as we go along, if you have any questions, let me know. This is where we will start today, and then in the second half of the class, we will get into the new week 2 assignments. Hopefully you've taken an opportunity to download your submission. To download the new assignment, to download the new game. We have a brand new game called Angry Bots that we will be talking about. We'll talk about new game requires new music, which also requires a new way that the music is set up and plays back in the game. So we will get into that in the second half. And the other main assignment for this week is you will be doing all of the sound design for 2D platformer. So the first week you did all of the music composition. Second week you will be designing the sound effects. So we'll get into that here in just a moment. But like I said, we're going to start out with the peer review and listening to everyone's tracks. So let me just kind of show you what I have here in this logic session. You can see that if you submitted, you'll see your name up here. And how we'll go through, it's mostly, I think it's alphabetical order. We got the first section and the second section for everybody. And you will see, let me zoom out here. We basically have 3 sections here. This one all the way to the right, a little bit longer. These are all of the main loops, main loop 1, 2, and 3. All of these are the intros, and all of these are the endings. And they're set up this way because alphabetically that's how they import. We'll start out listening to the main loops because that's most of what you hear throughout the game. Gives us an idea of the overall composition, and then we'll see how the intros and the endings work their way in and out of the main loops. What other aspects? All right, let's go ahead and start with the main loops, discussing as a whole what we are listening for. Number one, the main loops, they need to loop. They are set up as 8-bar loops, and so there should be no pops or clicks or gaps or fades or anything that interrupts the loop. It needs to be 8 bars. The instrumentation needs to be consistent across all 3 of the main loops. You should have drums, bass, harmony, and melody. And those instruments should maintain and stay the same throughout all of these cues, main loops, and all intros and endings. It needs to feel like the same band is playing the same music across all 9 files. The main loops are going to basically rearrange or be played in any sort of order during the gameplay. And they're just going to shuffle around and around and around. And that means that the beginning of each one of these cues needs to work with the ending of the previous cue. They need to, it's kind of like puzzle pieces, they need to lock in together. We mentioned that resolving back to the tonic might be a safe bet so that you know that all of them are going to easily fit together. Maybe we might hear some other setups that might work also. What else can we talk about? Even though that the instrumentation is consistent through each of these cues, there should be change and variation. One of the main things that I hear is development within an 8-bar cue. The music is going to be looping on its own. It's going to be loopy enough for the fact that you have 3 8-bar loops that are constantly playing and going around and around during the gameplay. So you don't want to increase that feeling of looping music by writing 2 4-bar phrases in an 8-bar cue, or writing, even worse, a 2-bar phrase that repeats 4 times in that 8-bar cue. It's going to seem repetitive enough just with 8 bars. Don't write 2 4-bar loops in an 8-bar space, or 4 2-bar loops in an 8-bar space, or even worse, 8 1-bar loops. I get this every once in a while where the music is repetitive enough. Within the 8 bars, you want to make sure you have development and change over each 8 bars. Mostly you're going to be using the melody to do this that develops and evolves over the course of each of the 8 bars. And then there needs to be change from one cue to the next. So slight changes in the drums and the rhythm, bass line changes up a little bit, chord progression shifts a bit, and then probably most strong would be the melody that will develop and evolve over each one of the cues. And this way, the music should be able to interchange and play in any order and stay consistent throughout. So taking a look, overall, the other aspect, I guess, would be mix. And looking at a couple of these files, the overall mix seems to be quite loud. We'll have to take a look at it and look at the individual submissions. So you do ultimately have control over the final mix because you are creating both the music and sound effects. You need to balance them together. But you need to leave room for the sound effects so it's not just your music playing together. And when you make your sound effects this week, you should be listening to your music at the same time to balance those sound effects, or at least in the mixing stage. Just kind of at some point import your music and listen to it against all of your sound effects to make sure that when they get put together in the game, you can actually hear something. Either the music doesn't dominate or the sound effects doesn't dominate. So these look like they have really strong waveforms, like there was maybe a compressor or a limiter. Even this one where there's no dynamics to the music, it's just a lower overall level. You want to watch out for, I mean, it all depends on the style of the music, and we'll end up listening to it overall to see how it sounds. So let's shift over here to the intros. Let's see. Anything else to see? Most of these look like they're set up to loop. At least visually, they look like they're ready to go. Then the intros. The intros need to build or rise in intensity heading into the main loops. So what ends up happening is a random intro is connected to a random main loop, and you want to make sure that this transition is as smooth as possible. And that is through a consistent level from one to the next, and whatever chord or melody or note that you end up here kind of holds and will transition smoothly into the next cue. Overall, like the ones that I said were louder over here, these intros are also loud, so there's not a big striking difference in levels between the intros and the endings. You generally want the shape of the intro to feel like it rises or builds. But of course, we'll take a listen to the music. That's what's most important. And with the endings, number one, the endings need to end, meaning that they need to reach silence by the end of the file. So the audio should not get cut off by the end of the file. These files look like they're going to end correctly. These ones look like they get cut off. These look like they might end. They're really close. These files look quite a bit lower. Well, these overall in level could actually be raised up, and these levels of the endings look quite a bit low. These cues, at least the 1 and 2, look like they get cut off a bit. These look like they end, although there might be a little too much like ending there. These look like they get really close. These look like they get cut off, pretty close. They look like they stop. Those look like they end also. So, at least visually, those are some of the things that we are looking out for. So, we will take a listen, and of course, actually listening to everything is most important. So, let's start at the first one here. And again, let me know if you can't hear me, or the music is too loud, or I'm too loud, or anything like that. So let's start with our first 3 main loops. So we got some fun instrumentation overall. We got some drums, brass, some tubular bells, chimes, piano. All right, so I think compositionally it works out very well. The rhythm and pacing of the music works nicely for this type of game. I think that the mix is probably the main thing that the music suffers from. It definitely feels like there's an overall compressor or limiter that is hitting the master, or that is on the master and is kind of squashing. Everything's pushed really hard into a compressor or limiter, removing most of the mix and removing the dynamics. So definitely back off of any sort of overall dynamic processing like that. The other thing that I notice is a really sharp change in the first half and the second half of each one of these cues, which is good because I do encourage development and change in each one of the cues. But what I typically am hearing is you state a phrase that is 4 bars, then you repeat it the next 4 bars, and then you change quite a bit in instrumentation and pattern and progression in the second half of that same cue. And even that allows, it indicates more of a change of where you are in the cue. You want as much as possible to lose people in the music so that they don't, it's kind of underscore background where they are not focused on where they are in the music and where they are in the loop. Where when you create such sharp changes in the first half and the second half, then it becomes obvious where I am in the loop and where I am in a particular loop even. So I do definitely encourage a change, and you should probably develop more in, let's say you state A, the first 4 bars, then you state A again, so shift that to either an A prime or a B, and then you shift it off to a C and then repeated a C again, so shift off to a slight change in the second 4 bars across each one of them. So that would be the first thing. I would first work on the mix and then work on the consistency of each one of the cues. But compositionally, it works very nicely, or fits the theme of the game quite well. Just check something here. Intros work pretty well, maybe a little bit more from the drums. That one works well. It really feels like the drums kind of get buried in the mix. There's a pretty solid rise. I think I was being thrown off. There's a little bit of a gap. Tiny gap in the front of each one of these. But that should work. Then let's try the 3 ending cues. Great. Yep. Yeah, that works very well. And one of the main reasons that it works, and something that I'll probably point out quite a bit for some of the ones that get cut off by the end of the music, is that you hit the first beat of bar 2, and that's where you end everything. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So it's that beat 1 of bar 2. Well, that one actually doesn't. So this one extends a little bit longer, but definitely still ends in enough time. But hitting beat 1 of bar 2 is a very common way of ending those ending cues. All right, very good overall. Let's try the next one here. Let me adjust my levels again. And I'm going to say that this is going to maybe have some of the same issues with the overall level. You want to back off on the dynamics. So again, great energy. The mix is pretty pushed pretty far overall. I think there might be a little bit too much change from one cue to the next. And some of that might be mix, where I would prefer that all of the instruments that exist or exist in all three cues. So the first one, you have a really strong guitar line, which is great. And then over here, the guitar is there, but it's really kind of buried overall. And this synth line really dominates the mix, and I didn't really catch it as much in here overall. And then I do like this kind of like a halftime kind of feel here. But the drums seem quite a bit different. So I think there's some great ideas in here, but there could also be some consistency, whether it's from the instrumentation or it's buried in there in the mix overall. Let's see these three intros. Right, so they definitely build up. Yeah, so they've got some good changes in the second bar overall. I do notice that the intro 1 here has the guitar, and the intro 2 has the lead synth line, but you're not guaranteed that intro 1 is going to go to main loop 1, so guitar is going to go to guitar, or synth is going to go to synth. So you might want to make these a bit more generic to be able to connect to any combination of main loop. And then 3 endings. Cool. They definitely work on the as an ending. They hit that beat 1 of bar 2. They just don't go to silence fast enough. So you can actually get away with making the ending cues longer than 2 bars as long as the music ends in 2 bars, which it does. And these endings seem to want to extend out a bit more. So you can actually extend these out, probably not forever, certainly, but maybe use a little bit of the fade tool to fade them to silence, but you can extend them out a little bit more. Let's see, some more room. So if you had that fade in with, so fade out with the reverb tail and the instrument decay, you can kind of get away with that in the endings. So, all right. So great idea, great ideas compositionally. I think it's more about consistency between the different combinations of the cues, and back off on the overall mix. All right. Next one. Should be good to go. So, great kind of a positive vibe to it. Great use of the major key, works very well for the style of music for the game. Really upbeat and energetic. Let's see, a couple of things that I was thinking of. I was listening for change mainly in the rhythm and the chord progression. There's an obvious good development in the lead melody, but there could be a lot more change in the drums and the harmonic instrument. I'm trying to... It feels like some sort of arpeggiated strum sort of thing. It has a pretty long decay on it, so it kind of washes together and becomes almost like a drone in the background, but you got the plucks following the chord progression. And I think it's the decay across the instrument. Could be a lot more variation rhythmically in the... I know that there is change in the drums, I know that there is change in the chord progression, but the sounds of those instruments don't seem to change much from one cue to the next. And I'm hearing almost like a chunk or like a gated part where the longer dynamics of, or the longer decay, sorry, of that harmonic instrument in the background changes up. It's kind of a difficult way to describe it. So maybe more variation from the drums and the harmony in the background. And let's go to 3 intros. These intros seem to be on the quarter notes when the main loops are more, feel like they're more on the 8th notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Feels almost, these feel almost double of what the intros do. So maybe have some of that instrumentation. Also feels like the instruments are quite a bit different. It's missing something that's over here in the main loop. And 3 endings. I think there's a synth in there, that sort of portamento synth in there, that seems a bit out of place from the rest of the instrumentation. As long as everything ends and reaches silence, you're good there. All right, so good stuff from there. Mainly hearing more variation in the main loops. All right. Next one here. First thing I see is probably overall levels could come up so that they could compete. It could compete nicely with the sound effects. And we'll start with the main loops. So I hear a drum pattern, a woodwind, some brass, probably mix up some more instruments into the cues. There's like an electric piano in there. Maybe using the brass and the woodwinds sound a bit synthetic through here. Mostly difference in dynamics, the velocity of the instrumentation to make it more realistic so that it actually performs more like a live instrument. Probably better to switch those over to synths. Watch the repetition in the progressions. Like the drum patterns. Alright, and then 3 intros. Ooh, these 3 intros are much louder. drums seem to change quite a bit in the second one here. They work well as intros, and 3 endings. Maybe a little bit more from the drums. They seem to kind of stop compared to what they were doing over in the main loops. And make sure everything reaches an end. All right, so yeah, choose some other instruments than the brass and woodwinds for these cues, and work on the realism of the instruments. Next one here. Again, the levels look quite a bit heavy through each of these cues, especially these main loops here. So let's see what we have. Okay, yeah, you can see the meter basically doesn't move here, and there's no stereo information. There's no difference between left and right. Basically is redlining the whole time, so really affects the mix. It really feels like you're pushing into a compressor or limiter that makes the whole mix kind of shake around, and the drums get buried. There's no power from any one of the instruments, so definitely work on that. The repetition, like especially from that banjo, the no change in the velocity or dynamics makes it sound synthetic again. Might as well use a synth instrument instead with a pluck. Sounds like kind of robotic overall. The number 2, I definitely like the best out of the 3, and I think what you're doing with the organ there, and maybe the bass line. So watch out for the major repetitive aspects of 1 and 3. Work more towards what you're doing in main loop 2. These intros don't seem to suffer as much from the mix overall. Probably because of different instrumentation. So these instruments don't seem to be prevalent much in the other mix unless they're way buried back in there. So you're going to make sure that it's consistent into these. You can even see, just visually see how different they look. And there's like organ and all this other instruments in there that make for a sudden change. And 3 endings. All right, so number 1 would be drums. You want to make sure each one of them have drums to make it, again, consistent from the main loops into these. They work mostly as endings. You probably should hit that first beat of bar 2 in the same way so that you can hit that last note and then everything reaches silence. Kind of aim for that in those endings. All right, 3. Next one, halfway through. All right. Here we go. The main thing I hear here is the going to be the looping of these files. And they need a consistent rhythm and beat. You need a metronome, you need 8 bars, and focus on the tempo, the time signature, the metronome, quantization. You probably should have a kick and snare on 2 and 4. So let's see if I can follow this. Dun, 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 dun. Like, you need a solid beat behind there to basically set up your DAW in the tempo that you are at. Set the time signature up here at the top, and set a particular. You can even create an empty set of bars. What I often like to do is to say, here's my pencil tool, and this is not going to work on a audio track. Let me create a MIDI track. MIDI track. Yes, one. Fine, wherever. Come down here. And when on my MIDI track, I'll just use the pencil tool and create an 8-bar loop. 5, 6, 7, 8. And then always use this as my guide to know where my 2 bars, my 4 bars, my 8 bars are. And then use quantization. Always use the metronome to make sure that everything stays on beat, because the game is going to switch and change at the end of these files, and things like this gap here is going to cause issues as the file loops. Here, let's do 3 intros. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That one works. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's some quantization errors in there, or issues that can just tighten everything up to allow for smoother transitions. 3 endings. That one works. Works. Maybe the symbol's a little late. All right. Something else to watch out for are gaps like this at the beginning of the files. Gaps like this at the beginning of ending 3. That will cause a hiccup as it transitions from a main loop into an ending, like this. All right. So if I take this and I do this and I go listen to these, come on. It'll play back like that in the game, where there'll be a small gap as it moves from one piece of music to the next. So those are the types of things that you have to watch out for to make sure that everything's formatted and ready to play back correctly in the game. All right, next one here. Next main loops. Cool. There's some great energy in there too. Instrumentation works. I mean, could really benefit from a real guitar through there, but it'll work for our purposes. I'd say maybe main loop 2 is a little repetitive in its phrasing overall. There are some, I mean, obviously it follows the chord changes, and there is some movement. Last chord changes nicely, but maybe a little bit more variation through that second one. But overall, fits nicely for the game. Three intros. Okay, so drums. Probably needs a whole lot more drum to help the intro, to help the build. Mostly in the second bar overall. I think the rest of the instrumentation does its job of building up. But if you just had some snare rolls and some kicks building up, just a little roll in there. It's just everything subdividing the beat as it builds up. And 3 endings. Cool. All of those work very nicely as endings. You just have to make sure maybe you need a little bit of extra room to give the instruments enough time to fade to silence. Great stuff. Let's keep going. Like I mentioned earlier, these look, I mean, the levels are not, well, everything looks kind of flattened off from a compressor or a limiter, even though the levels are a bit lower overall. So watch out for the dynamics of the mix. Three of them seem to be building up towards something that never actually hits. I'm looking mostly for a kick and snare and hi-hat pattern in there, especially the first one has no drums in it. All 3 of them do the just that kind of repeating thing. The last 2 get much more intense overall. Everything seems just a bit too intense for the theme and aesthetic of this game and the general audience. I mean, I guess this would work much more faithfully for the Angry Bots game that's coming up this week. But it needs to have a strong pattern to it, a lead line that develops. Feels like they don't even feel like they connect. They all build and build and build, and then just the next one starts. So make sure you work on the consistency from one cue to the next. Yeah, these are just feel like 2-bar phrases. They don't feel like intros. Well, there's a white noise sweep there, but there's not a... I need the instruments to kind of build, and these don't look like they resolve either. These all feel like chunks out of a larger song. So definitely work on the intros and endings. Work on the composition of the overall main loops to help create that rise and build from the intros to maintain energy and change between the different main loops, and then to resolve strongly to an ending. Next. Well, the best part of this one is the drums. There's got interesting things going on there, but the progression basically feels the same. Oops, where did the loop go? Basically feels the same in each one. It needs a melody. There's no melody to change or develop. Then it feels repetitive. Da 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 ba 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 ba. It's very, very similar without melodic development. So drums work, provide a good energy from one to the next. It's just twice as fast. Again, the drums do their job. Get away from just the da 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 da. Yeah, make sure you hit that tonic and resolve to silence. I mean, it works better through here because you were ending, and it's not the exact same pattern. But yeah, work on a variation from one cue to the next beyond the drums. Next. Compositionally, I think it works well. Except for the drums don't change all that much from one to the next. Melody definitely, chord progression does, bass line does. Drums could definitely change more from one to the next. Then I think it lacks a bit from the mix. Everything seems very mono. It just sticks right here in the center. Even when I put the headphones on both sides, you can really hear that it feels like all of the instruments are stacked up right on top of each other right in the middle. So spread things out a bit. Work on maybe EQing to carve out different areas of the mix for the different instruments. And then have more variation through those drum parts. Cool. Intros work pretty well. I was going to say the first two, the drums sound similar. That roll at the end. It's a little different in the third one, but it also sounds a bit off. And 3 endings. think they work as endings. They do sound a little hurried to end. So if you hit that beat 1 of bar 2, could probably be a good place to kind of put a period at the end of the sentence. So overall compositionally, I think melody and progression wise, they work out well. Work on the mix, work on the drums a bit, will help fit it all together. All right, try for the next one. Cool. Not many complaints here. Works very well. Fits nicely in the 8-bar loops. You got the strong development from the lead that develops over the 8 bars. Mix works out very nicely. Strong drums and positioning of all the instruments. I like the kind of call and response feel through this one. Slightly, right? Right? So it just kind of dances back and forth. And so there's a strong enough shift. Even though the drums are the same from one to the next, pretty darn close if they're not exactly the same, but basically just keeps the energy up enough with enough change from the rest of the instrumentation. Could definitely feel it fitting in a 16-bit game or something like that. Works very nicely for our 2D platformer stuff. Let's see here. Cool. Now let's throw this one over here. See what this sounds like. Yeah, I just want to make sure that you're using all the instrumentation that is found in each one of these. Whoops. And it is also present in the intros, so then whatever combination, you always want to check to make sure these always fit against the different... I don't think I made that correct. No. That one works better overall. All right. 3 endings. Yep. Cool. Yep. All end nicely. Is that little pitch wobbles in there, makes it sound a little bit different than the other cues, but I think they should fit nicely. So as long as you can go through and make intro 1, 2, and 3 work with main loop 1, 2, and 3 work with ending 1 through, can't even say it, ending 1, 2, and 3, then you should be good. Making sure, I mean, compositionally, mix-wise, development-wise, it hits the mark. So you just want to make sure you pay attention to the details of all the different transitions and composition combinations. And one more. right. So I think the overall aesthetic of it works pretty well for the game. I would mainly work on the repetition. First 4 bars, second 4 bars really feel similar from one to the next. So watch out for that repetition. There's decent change from one cue to the next, but within a particular cue, you could definitely have changes in the drums and, you have changes in drum pattern, like that, but changes in the progression and the melody. Let's do 3 intros. The third one's the strongest of the 3. I think I like 2 and 3 because it keeps that pace through the whole intro. This one kind of holds and then slowly builds up. Maybe focus a bit more on the third one there. And 3 endings. These look correct. Yep. Cool. Yep. All right. So endings work out, work against these cues. Maybe a little bit. The instrumentation seems a bit thin and light, which might actually work for this type of game. Maybe a little bit more level from the cues, so that it will mix nicely against the sound effects. All right. We did a good job. We made it all the way through. Let's see everybody's submissions. Again, we heard lots of good stuff. Lots of different approaches. Get all that away. We heard some good things. We heard some bad things. We heard some things to watch out for and things to try out and pay attention to. So hopefully that gives you some good insight into your own composition. Good insight into some approaches that you might take. Again, you will receive some grades and feedback on all of this by Wednesday and Thursday, and you can take all of that feedback. And honestly, if yours is one of the ones up here, then I can probably get started on a lot of that stuff because I'm going to probably say a lot of the same stuff for your individual feedback, but gives you some insight, and maybe you can take a few things away from this on your own composition, and even if you didn't submit, and make some changes there. So, and again, now that you've seen how we go through that in one pass, hopefully it encourages everybody else to submit for next week, so we can see all sorts of different approaches for our new game project. So that's what we'll get into. If you have any questions so far, please let me know. Post it up there on the chat. But we will get into the new week's assignments here for week 2. So like I mentioned earlier, hopefully you've taken the opportunity to download the new assignments for this week. So we have our next game called Angry Bots. Let me open up a few things here to get set up. A new game requires a new type of music. It is a new type of game overall, so it requires a new approach to that music. What else do I need here? So we'll talk about how the music is going to work, how it's going to sound, what is the game all about, and how does that work. So, okay, I think I got everything. So let me switch over here to the video of the game. Excuse me. And start that up. So, our new game this week is called Angry Bots. Please take the opportunity to download and check out the game, play through it as soon as you can to get a sense of what it is all about. And Is it playing? No, good. Um, this game is made by Unity Games, the same people that made 2D Platformer. They make the Unity game engine, and we'll talk about game engines this month and what that means for us. It's kind of like saying I made my game in Pro Tools or Logic, or I don't know, I made my music in Pro Tools and Logic. You can make your game in a software called the Unity Game Engine. And they released a whole bunch of demo games to show off all of their technology. And we can go in there and rip apart the music and sound and put in our own music and sound. So this game has a much sort of much more modern game feel to it. It's a bit more of an advanced game overall. It's probably a bit more of a adult audience overall. I mean, it's not really all that graphic. So it's robots, and it's got weapons and explosions, and you are a mercenary infiltrating this robot factory, and the robots are not happy about it at all, and so they come to attack, and they want you out of their robot factory, but it's your job to push farther and farther in. And the music for this game is going to have a much more modern synthetic approach and feel to it. It is a futuristic type of game with all sorts of, I don't know, there's lots of sci-fi doors that open and close, and robots that attack, and some interesting opportunities for sound design. But the music is probably going to work as some big, loud, strong, intense style of music. A more modern production style, so lots of synths and drum machines and effects processors. Now's the time to use all of those fun sounds and techniques because we throw away all of the sound effects processors, or throw away all of the synths and drum machines next week, and we go entirely acoustic orchestral composition for our game Palace of Orinthalion next week. But this week, now is the time to get into all of those production styles for our fast and loud and intense action game here. So the way the music is going to work, you encounter, the main part of this game focuses on your encounter with these robots. For a period of the game, you're going to be wandering around like this guy, wondering what to do, and then all of a sudden a robot comes out and attacks, and your music is going to have to shift between lower intensity ambient music and a higher intensity action music. And it's this change between a lower intensity and higher intensity music that becomes the challenge for this composition. How do we go back and forth between two strong pieces of music when we don't have any clue when that's going to happen, and there's going to be random pieces of music for each one of these different robots? So where last week 2D Platformer really focused on the idea of intros, main loops, and endings, right? Sometimes it's known as start, loop, stop. This one is focused on the idea of ambient and action. Sometimes it's also called exploration and battle, where lots of games do this, where for a period of time, you're just kind of wandering around aimlessly, you're figuring out what's going on, where's the next part of the game, and all of a sudden you encounter an enemy, you stumble across some bad guys, and the battle is on, and the music is going to shift and change for that. So let's talk about how the music is set up. Where's my mouse? There we go. Over here, along with this assignment that you download, number one, you get the game. Runs similar to our game last week. And you get that video that I just showed, so you don't always have to play the game. You just watch the video, check out what the game's all about. And you get this PDF document, music design document that talks about all sorts of different aspects of this composition. So, game overview here talks a lot about ambient and action, or gives an introduction to it. and how it's going to work in the game. How to play Angry Bots: you can use the up, down, left, and right arrows. Left click to shoot and fire at the enemies. A couple of reference listening tracks for a sense of the style of the music. Musical style: high energy, over the top production styles, fast electronic, epic metal, epic orchestral. Basically, the action cues need to be loud and strong and frantic and bombastic, and the robots are chasing you around with missiles and laser guns and all sorts of stuff. So you want it to sound intense overall to really accentuate the action in the battle that's happening. Some suggested strong instruments that work well for the game. Further discussion of what ambient and action are going to do in the game and how the game switches back and forth. Different cue themes, screenshots and information about all of the different files that you'll be creating, all of the different parts of the music. But this is the part I really want to get to, the asset list. And this lists the 7 files that you will be creating. The final thing that you will be turning in for this, or the main thing that you need to create, are these 7 files. We have an ambient loop, and this is over a minute long, 16-bit stereo file, and you are going to hear this most often. If nothing else is happening in the game, you are hearing this ambient cue. If the player just stands somewhere in a corner, the ambient cue is going to loop and go around and around. And you want this to be pretty long because they're going to hear it quite often in the game. So the ambient loop does not mean the genre of ambient music, meaning that it is not just a drone, a slow pad that doesn't really change except for over a long period of time. The ambient cue can have drums. The ambient cue can have a pulse and a strong rhythm to it. It can have lots of instrumentation and should, just as long as the action cues are even bigger and louder and stronger than that. So that's the main thing that we're listening for, is that difference in intensity. The ambient cue is, no matter how loud or soft that ambient cue is, the action cue just needs to be bigger and louder than that. So how does the game know how to switch back and forth between ambient and action? That's really the challenge here, is this transition between these two pieces of music. And the way that the game works is it uses health points to determine when the battle is happening. So you'll see here, I'll start battling with the enemy here, and it doesn't take too long to destroy the enemies, right? Come over here. Actually, let me do this. This is called the Buzzer Bot. This guy who flies around, he's got this like lightning bolt attack. Let me back up here, see? He comes in here and zaps me, boom. They're meant to kind of fly around and zap you and be kind of annoying. Those are called the Buzzer Bots. These are called Spider Bots. They're basically bombs on legs that kind of skitter across the floor and walk closer and closer to you, and eventually they'll explode. And then there is the Mech Bot. This big, you'll see him here in a little bit. It's a big kind of a RoboCop-looking mech robot that walks down the hallway. Here's one last Spider Bot, and here you go. So he comes walking down the hallway, shoots you with the missiles. This would maybe be considered like the boss battle. Big, more difficult enemy. It really still doesn't take all that long to defeat them. Notice that the battles are pretty short overall. And so that means you have an action cue for each one of these robots. A buzzer action cue, a spider action cue, and a mech action cue. They are all each 8 bars long. 16-bit 44:1 stereo files. But they're pretty quick, and they need to be loud and strong and intense. Sometimes I hear action cues where they're really kind of a little bit laid back and chill. You want to like hang out with the robots and not to actually battle them. overall. So you want to watch out and really focus on a strong intensity level difference between these two. So you want to make sure that, again, they're chasing you with missile launchers. They're chasing you with laser guns. They're zapping you. They're not your friend overall. You want to make sure that the music reflects that. And this time, you do not have to focus so much on consistency from one cue to the next. So each of the cues, the buzzer action cue, the spider action cue, and the mech action cue, can have its own unique instrumentation, drums and rhythms and all sorts of stuff, because you want to give each robot its own individual musical voice, so that even like when this guy, let's go back here. Even when this guy comes down the hallway, you can't see him yet. The music starts. You should be able to recognize what robot's coming after you, even just by hearing them before seeing them overall. So you can have a little bit more difference from one cue to the next. So we have our ambient cue. That switches over to our action cue. And then our stinger cues. Whenever you go to, and encounter, let's say, a spider bot, you will hear the exact same spider action cue. There's no randomization. Last time we had main loop 1, 2, and 3, which means I could randomly choose, and there was a bit of randomization, a bit of variation each time. Every time you encounter a spider bot, you're going to hear the same piece of music. So to help that transition, to make this as smooth as possible, you are going to use a stinger in order to help provide some of this variation. And a stinger is also there to hide the transition from ambient to action. So let me do this. Oops. Let me switch back over here and talk my way again through here. So when the game starts, and if nothing else is happening, then the player will hear the ambient cue. And then how does the game know when to switch from ambient to action? Well, it uses health points. And as soon as somebody loses health points, right here, right, it zaps me. Or if I shot it at some point first, it would start the music. So as soon as somebody loses health points, right, zap, right there, then the music starts. It goes from ambient to action immediately. You are not guaranteed where the music is. You're not guaranteed if it's on beat or if it's in sync or anything. It's just going to hard cut from one to the next. Now that works because you're going from lower intensity music to higher intensity music. You just got zapped. You just took damage. The battle's on. You're about to fight them real quick. More than likely with the faster music, the heart rate goes up. It's kind of like if somebody jumps out and scares you. Right, your heart rate immediately shoots up, but it doesn't. When you realize, oh, that person jumped out, it was just my friend. It doesn't immediately go back down to normal. You have to kind of breathe and calm down a little bit. So as soon as you get zapped here, battle music starts. Boom, switches from ambient to action. Battle is on until somebody loses all of their health points. More than likely, that's going to be a robot because they're actually pretty easy to defeat. There's just a whole bunch of them. And the music at that point switches back to ambient. So we go from ambient, you get hit, switches to action until battle is over. And over time, it will fade back to ambient. Like I said, you can't go from a higher intensity action down to a lower intensity ambient immediately. It's like the bottom dropped out of your mix. It's like your drummer left or something like that and just stopped, and everything comes to a very sudden stop. And so when your heart rate rises, it can jump up very quickly, but you have to breathe a bit, calm down, and return back to where you were. So same thing with the action music. Action music ends, and it takes about 3 seconds for the ambient music to come back in. All right, so battle starts, they jump up, the action music, spider action music goes around and around and around for as long as the battle is going on. As long as they're there, the action music keeps going until somebody loses all of their health points or gets destroyed. Boom, bad guy blows up, and it takes 3 seconds to go back to ambient, returns back to normal. Then all of a sudden, battle starts, new action music comes in, the battle's over, crossfades over 3 seconds back to ambient. All right, and it goes around and around and around like that, creating the whole music that you hear. So the stingers are going to be there from ambient into action. They're played at the same time as one of these action cues to help the transition. So let me play some music here. Let's listen to something so we can see how this is going to work. We have 4 different student submissions. These are all of the ambient cues. These are all of the action cues. And these are all of the stinger cues. And let's start out. We're going to listen to an ambient cue, and then we'll jump into each one of these action cues to see how this might sound. All right, turn this down. Start with this first one. All right, so I said earlier that having just a pad or a drone is something you typically want to avoid in the cues, but you can definitely have it be there as an element. As long as there is also drums and a little bit of rhythm and harmony and a melody and all of those different elements, you'll be have a pretty solid ambient cue. The other thing that works very well is what I'll often term as musical sound design, which is taking your instruments, synths and samplers and effects processors, sample libraries, and just modulating them with a whole bunch of effects, changing them. You can hear there's a pace, like a rhythm through here, then it switches over here to another kind of tone and effect. But basically there's change throughout the cue. Different instruments come in and out. You can take instruments beyond their range, put them through a whole bunch of effects and stutters and reverses and reverbs and delays and distortions and stack things and have arpeggiators and come in and out of the mix, and just all sorts of different elements that you can work with. Make sure the ambient loop loops, and then we'll jump over here to these 3 action cues. And so there's the buzzer action cue. Here's the mech action cue. So you can hear change from one to the next. Rhythmic change, like the spider cue feels double time to the others. Feels almost like the legs kind of skittering about on the ground. The mech cue is about kind of a halftime feel. Buzzer action cue fits right between those. So there's a strong intensity difference from one cue to the next. Here are the 3 stingers. Let's see. First one. One's a decent one overall. One's all right. Not all that great. The best thing, best way to work with your stingers is to have a strong impact at the front and make sure that they fade out to silence quite quickly. Let me play how this might sound. So your ambient cue is playing, and at some point it randomly gets cut off, and a oops, an action cue comes in and plays, and at the same time, the stinger cue is going to play in with this transition over to the action cue. That should work. Play some of this. All right, so you're in ambient, and then you hear the stinger right along with the action cue. And then eventually it'll take about 3 seconds for the action cue to go away and the ambient cue to start up. Right, so ambient cue was playing. Oops, was playing. And then at some point, the spider bot jumps awake and you hear the stinger and the action cue. And then the battle is over and it crossfades back to the original ambient piece of music to start the whole process over and go around and around. So that's how the music is set up, and that's how it's working in the game. Let's try another one here. Let's do this one. No, let's not do that one. Let's do this one. All right, so this one has more of a melody, has a rhythm going on through the ambient cue. It's not just a drone throughout. Then it breaks into the action cues. Stronger synth feel to it, strong rhythm, faster pace overall. And you'll hear changes from one action cue to the next. And the spider cue. So you can hear a solid change from one to the next. Here are these 3 stingers. They're not very good. Watch out. All right, that's just like a 90s orchestra hit. Oops. Here's another stinger. Those are very small sounding. They're probably going to get lost against the main loops, or I'm sorry, against the action cues. Here's some more. These kind of work as stingers. Can almost think of kind of EDM turnarounds and drops where they have a big cymbal crash and a big kick. That's probably the basic level, is just kick and crash. Add some modulation in there, bass drops, and have things kind of twist and modulate through pitch or filter to add some interesting change in that stinger. So that as you transition from ambient into action, you have something that glosses over that sudden shift from between the two cues. All right, hopefully that gives you some ideas for Angry Bots, some indication of how the music is set up. The idea of ambient and action is really where we are focused for this particular composition, and gives you some ideas of how you might work with that composition or work with that project. The other half of this is your sound design for 2D platformer. And for this one, you will be creating all of the 18 sounds required for the sound effects. The nice thing about 2D platformer is a lot of these can be done with your vocals, done with your voice, and you just open up a microphone and create a lot of the sound effects. And the reason for that is there are a lot of what are called efforts or vocalizations, where those are like like the hits and the ouches and the taunts and the jumps will actually have you creating those types of sounds. So when you download this assignment, you get the PDF that goes right along with it. Looks like this. And gives you indication, a bit of a description about the assignment. Talks about sources for your sounds. You're creating sound effects, and you can find all sorts of different sounds sources. You could create your own, record your own, but there are certain sounds that would be best to be pulled from a sample library. So you can use Westar Music, which you should be already familiar with of how to access. It has a very nice and thorough sound effects library to pull from. You can also use freesound.org, which is kind of a community-driven free sound effects library. And freesound.org has a lot of sounds on it. Problem is that it has a lot of very bad sounds on it because it's kind of a crowdsourced public site. There's all sorts of weird, not weird stuff, but just lots. You have to kind of wade through all of the bad sounds to find the good ones, because there are a lot of very good sounds on there too. It just might be mixed in with some lower quality sounds overall. Then you have screenshots and information about each one of the sound effects that you'll be creating. But again, I want to jump down here to the sound effects asset list. Here are the 18 sound effects you will be creating. And when you build and work with this sound effects session, I would suggest that you pull the original sound effects from the game to use as reference when building your own, so you can generally get an idea of what you need to be doing. So that means I would start out with a brand new Logic session, or whatever session you would like to use for your sound design. Do I want to close this? Yes, I want to close that. Do I want to save it? No, don't save that one. Yes, do save that one. And you're going to create a session, brand new session. We'll create one new audio track. And I would suggest that you go find the original sound effects from the game and drag them into this first audio track. So here is a copy of the game. Where to go? Here is a copy of the game. And you can get all of the original sound effects when you play the game. So that's Angry Bots. We're not doing that one. We're doing 2D platformer. There it goes. When you play this game, you hear the original sound effects, and you can actually get access to those. And you're probably familiar with this because you did the video captures, but you can put your own music and sound effects into the game to make them work. So you get access to the original sound effects. You right-click on the application, choose Show Package Contents. It'll give you a folder appropriately named Contents. You'll go into Contents. You'll go to Data, and you'll go to Streaming Assets. And again, the assignment lists this process, or lists this folder. And there you'll find a music folder that should have all of your music files in them, and a sound effects folder that has all of the original sound effects. So I'm going to highlight all of these and just drag them into a Logic session. And I want them all to be on one track. I want them all to be back to back. Change the project. No, I want to convert the files, so I don't want to change the project. Convert all those files. They all come in all sorts of different random formats. So these are the original sound effects, and you should probably like go in here and make spaces in between just to maybe organize things a little bit better. But these are all the original sound effects that you can reference for how the sounds, how they sound, how loud the sounds are, how long do the sounds go for, what is the general shape of the waveform, what types of sounds might I need, all of those kind of things. Now, you will not include these sound effects into the final bounce, right? It's very obvious when it's not your own sound effects. But, so make sure you mute this when you actually bounce everything. But for guide and for reference, they're perfect for just seeing what needs to be done. So once you organize all of these, I would then create a whole bunch of tracks right below it, right? Create like 4 or 5 new blank tracks. And then you would build your own sound effects directly below this. Eventually, I'm going to completely cheat and copy these. But eventually, you would have your own stack of sound effects. This would be muted, and you would bounce out your own, right? Do not copy the original one. That's not right. But you would have your own stack of files directly below. You don't have to follow it exactly, but just to get an idea of how things work. So let's listen to some of these sounds. When I do this, it might be easier just to do it through here. Now I want to be able to see the names here. Let's see. How loud is this? Okay, you can't hear that. So, what happens if I do this? Okay. I don't know if I have control over that. Let's see. Okay. Yes, it seems that I do. Seems that I might have volume control. So I'm going to turn some of these down because I don't know really how loud they might be. But let's listen to some of the original sound effects. So there are bomb, right? There's a bomb pickup. There are these little boxes that parachute in. Sometimes they have bombs, sometimes they have health. So you can pick up the bombs and drop them. So there's the explosion of the bomb boom. Let me turn this one down. Something like that. That I think is an absolutely massive, huge bomb explosion, which might work perfectly fine for the game, but you can find your own explosion there. The fuse sound. This is that's a very popular game sound. Does anybody recognize that sound? That shows up in a couple of different games. That is the bomb. Okay, the bomb fuse. When you drop the bomb, it takes about a second for that bomb to blow up, and that's the sound that you hear right before it blows up. I don't know if anybody has ever played Splinter Cell, a pretty popular game out there. This is when he flips down the visor to go into like night vision goggle mode. You hear that sound all the time. Bomb pickup. This is the parachutes. When they come down, you can actually pick up the bombs. What it does not sound like is you picking something up, right? This is what the bomb pickup sounds like. Right? It is a very synthy kind of pickup sound. It's very abstract. It doesn't sound like anything, and it can basically be whatever you want. So it can be very synthy. It could be some sort of acoustic version of the sound, but it's pretty much up to you at that point. Bomb set down.
Bombs away.
Right? That's a vocal. So you'll open up the microphone. You can say bombs away. You don't have to say exactly what he says. I would ask, please keep it family friendly, all ages appropriate. But you can certainly have fun with it as long as it's somewhere within the context of what's happening. Enemy death 1, 2, and 3. So this is when you shoot the enemies. These are the little sounds that they make. right? So open up your microphone, record 3 kind of grunts like that to knock those sounds out. Gunshot, right? Very simple, straightforward gunshot. The only problem is I don't really think that sounds like a bazooka in the game, right? The Bean character has a bazooka, but a really long rocket launcher bazooka kind of shot wouldn't necessarily work. This gunshot is very short in timing. So you typically want a shorter sound because the character or the player can hit the mouse button so fast. You don't want these really long sounds just stacking on top of each other. So a really quick kind of gunshot sound can actually work. But it's up to you as to the sound of the rocket launcher of the main character. Health pickup. Again, some sort of random abstract sound that works for that particular action. And then we have the rest of these, again, are variations of vocalizations. So 3 jumps.
Huh. Huh. Huh.
All right. Notice that is the jump up. That is not the land down. Every once in a while, we'll get like feet hitting the ground. But you want the jump. This is when the character jumps up first, when they hit the space bar. 3 ouches. This is when your character takes damage.
Oh. Ow. Ow.
All right. Real simple sounds to do. 3 taunts.
Keep it classy. Bring it on. I say, old Bean.
Right? You play the game enough, you probably heard those called out every once in a while. I'm pretty sure that they are fairly random to play. I think maybe you either get a certain score, or you just take out a bad guy and it randomly fires one of those off. You can say exactly what they say in each one of these lines. You can make up your own. Have fun with it. Enjoy. Remember, it's your own custom project to have fun with. So a lot of these sounds are pretty straightforward to create. If you need something a little more complex, bombs exploding and gunshots and all that sort of stuff, you can pull those from the sample libraries. Start out with your own sound. Start out with the original sounds, and then build your own custom sounds below that. Excuse me. Below that, with the proper naming and formatting. All right. That, I think, wraps it up from me. That is everything that I needed to touch on. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up there. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'll stick around for a few minutes in the chat. But we will meet again on Thursday. And hopefully I will have grades ready to go for you at that point. And what else do we need to talk about? We did peer review, so hopefully you can take a chance at peer review for next week. If you have any questions on any of the grades or feedback that you get from for the first round, please let me know. If you have any questions on week 2 stuff, please let me know. All of those fun things. So otherwise, have a good afternoon, and I will see you again on Thursday. All right. Thanks a lot.